Well, it's another beautiful moment we're having here on Classic FM, the Discourse. I'm Sulaiman Lede, and quite a whole lot has been happening. And quickly here, we'll try to look at the fight against terrorism, the fight against banditry, insurgency, and all that concerns security, which are on the plate of the army, more so now that Nigeria has a new a new army chief of staff. Joining me to look at this in the next 1 hour is one of Nigeria's notable security consultant and expert, Kabir Adamu. Good to have you join me on the show, Kabir Adamu.
Thank you, Suleiman. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thanks for your time. First, quickly, this is the first time I'm having you on the Discourse since that very unfortunate incident which took the life of the former army chief, talking about General Attire. Let's start by asking how that news hit you on the day.
Thank you once again, Suleiman. It was a Friday evening, precisely around 7:30 when the news started filtering in. And like a lot of things in the recent history of Nigeria, we're a bit skeptical when we first heard of the news. So we reached out to other security agencies and then tried to hear from them whether the reality of that information is correct or not. And that was when we started, at least the authentication of the entire process. Initially, the fact that some of the news platforms mentioned that his wife was among the passengers, also that added another emotional sort of angle to it. But then a few, I think, minutes after that, there was clarification that she wasn't. So the focus remained now on the significance of the Chief of Army Staff dying just 4 months to 5 months after his appointment, and what impact that would have on the army itself, the military as a unit, the country, and then of course issues around succession and all that, even the very fragile national unity, the fact that he's a northerner and the fact that the second person in command is from the southeast. What impact would that have if that second person in command is not eventually, confirmed as the Chief of Army Staff and all that? So these were the things going through my head. Later, I got to find out the other passengers on the plane, some of them that I know personally, and then, of course, by the next day, the funeral and all that. So that hit really home, because these are people you've interacted with, some of them personally, and then some of them as a result of your work. And then seeing their family members, heartbroken like that, crying, on the screen, was really, really something heavy. And of course, we saw the response of the country as a whole, the government, and of course the military hierarchy. We also saw how the Minister of Defense was emotional and very shaken even on the day of the burial and all that. So all of that were the things going through my head, with the development, unfortunately.
Kabir, honestly, I think a lot of Nigerians share the same, more so especially people like yourself who's had some form of interaction with these people in the quest to Nigeria getting out of security imbroglio we're dealing with at the moment. One other thing that Nigerians have been talking about is the successor who's on the saddle today, talking about General Faruq. The thing here has to do with what a lot of people expect. First, it was something that deserves a commendation for the president to have quickly, because a lot of people were, asking the question, is the president going to take forever to fill this vacuum? But somehow he was able to do this within time, within space. How did that also come across? Because now he's been received by his colleagues. The gist is that they've started making some form of progress already. The terror group was run aground in a place called Ran. I want you to also talk about that and some other few places where the army had this fantastic burst on the terror group. Is this indicative of what's to come with the new army chief?
So thank you, Suleiman. First off, I think it's absolutely important to be compassionate about this and call a spade, and be factual. Now, the Nigerian Constitution puts the responsibility of the choice of a chief of army staff squarely on the shoulders of Mr. President. He has the prerogative to choose the person that he feels can deliver on his mandate. And the president's mandate has been majorly threefold, even though in his second tenure he expanded it to 9, but all the 9 are revolved around 3 basic things. That is tackling insecurity, fighting corruption, and then diversifying the economy. Now, our assumption is that any individual he names as within the security architecture are individuals that he feels can assist him in meeting these objectives in the area of security in particular. Now, there may be other considerations by us, we're human beings, we've got our preferences, we've got our choices, and there are certain quarters within the country that have made calls on Mr. President. In fact, one of the saddest things I have seen in my lifetime was last week when we all saw what was apparently sponsored media publications by individuals who felt they wanted to take on that seat, or persons who were supportive of those individuals who sponsored media publications. Now, why that is sad for me is because the military represents the highest institution, the highest echelon of discipline within our society. Now, if the military has been dragged into what unfortunately has become commonplace in Nigeria, where appointments are bought, quote and unquote, or are influenced by factors outside the core issues that should determine the appointment, including sponsoring publications in the media house. Now, that is the open one. You can imagine the closed types of lobbying and influencing that would have taken place in terms of meeting political players, mentors who would reach out to Mr. President, or people they feel are close to Mr. President to determine their choice. Now, let's take that out and sort of conclude on what Mr. President has done, which is to appoint someone that frankly was not even in the top 10 list of those that were being suggested. Yes, he's heading an influential operation, which is Operation Hadinkai, the immediate past Operation Lafia Dole that under the immediate past Chief of Army Staff, the name was changed to Operation Hadinkai. That's significant in the sense that terrorism, when Mr. President was elected, terrorism was the what I would say the highest ranking threat to Nigeria's corporate existence, as it were. Even though things have changed now, there are other I would say more important issues. I think terrorism has remained in the mind of Mr. President as the major threat facing the country, and so perhaps that explains why he has given, especially Operation Hadinkai, the kind of prominence. Several of the persons he has appointed have either served, even the Chief of Defense Staff has served as the commander of Operation Lafia Dole before he went to Chad under the multinational joint task force. So clearly, Mr. President has some sentiment regarding development in the Northeast as they have to do with terrorism. And so this person that has been appointed is coming from that class. He is also a professional who over time has proven himself. He's also served with a former Minister of Defense. So one is hoping that during that period, he has learned the tricks of leadership, as it were, the political leadership. Because the thing about the Chief of Army Staff is that you don't only have to command operational respect, you must be able to play that political game to bring the political players together to support your objectives, and anyone who is occupying that seat must have that. So we're hoping that in that capacity, he would have at least learned some aspects of that political leadership. Likewise, as a GOC in Div 1, as well as this commander of Operation Lavi Aduli, where he interfaced with politicians. We're hoping that he has also learned that. So it appears to me that his choice is well informed, even though unfortunately it has not addressed the other issues that I talked about. There were certain segments of the country that expected, like the chief of the COPP to be appointed, who is of course from the southeast. But then, like I said, it's the prerogative of Mr. President. He has appointed someone that has been well received within the army. I'm not aware that there is any quarters within the army that has objected to the appointment of General Faruq. There are, concerns out there that because he's from COAS 37, members of COAS 35 and 36 may have to go. Perhaps in the course of the conversation we can discuss that.
Well, absolutely. I think that's another issue that we also must bring up because just the way you have highlighted concerning the appointment of General Faruq Yahaya, it's not cast in stone. It rests, solely within the powers of the president to so appoint. And so again, some other permutation that a lot of people have been making. We'll try as much as possible to also look at that, if anything, to make it more clear for people to understand that, again, it is also not cast in stone. The good thing here is that, let me quickly remind you of some of the things we said before you gave that very interesting, expose into his appointment. It has to do with the task ahead. And just recently, we have seen some form of, advancement by the Nigerian troops. And people are asking, is it just a coincidence or a form of, boost which the troops are receiving from the new service chiefs, inclusive the very latest or the newest of them all, General Faruq Yahaya?
So, Suleiman, it's very difficult to give a mark in terms of success or not of the military operation in the Northeast, for the simple reason that it's been 11 to 12 years of a topsy-turvy, back and forth relationship between the military and the adversaries. Now, the incident that happened in Ran, and now for those who don't know the geography of Borno State, Ran is a border community. In fact, most people in Ran use the telephone network of Cameroon because of the proximity between Ran and Cameroon. And so it's an off area, it's a bit difficult sometimes to access, and developments there are sometimes not even heard about because no one is there to report it. Now, in this instance, there was an attempt to attack Ran, and the security forces there were successful in repelling that attack. And in the process, they killed several of the attackers. I think they seized one of their gun trucks, and so that definitely is a success. But if we take ourselves 2 weeks back, one of the adversary groups, the Islamic State in West Africa province, moved all the way from the island in the Lake Chad all the way to Sambisa forest, a distance of almost 200 plus kilometers from what we had in about 50, a convoy of 50 vehicles, and then invaded Sambisa forest, where the other group had its operational headquarters, and were successful in that invasion to the extent that they allegedly killed the leader of that group, and that is Shekau. So it's very difficult, for instance, to explain how a convoy of 50 vehicles would move from the Lake Chad basin into Sambisa forest and successfully conduct an attack. So where was the Nigerian military? Even our partners, who we know have surveillance capabilities in that location, how come they saw 50 vehicles moving and they did not raise the alarm in any way, or in the sense, from the point of view of the Nigerian military, how come we did not deploy a fighter jet to just drop one bomb on those 50 vehicles and eliminate them? So it's very difficult really to say whether just by one incident we've been successful. When a few weeks back this phenomenal development happened. I think before we can beat our chest and mark the word success in terms of the military operations, the entire space that the military is overseeing, which is the Nigerian part of the Lake Chad Basin, has to be free of any of these adversaries. And until we do that, then frankly the word success cannot be used as a term to describe the military operations in the Northeast.
No, Kabir, you've raised quite a very important, point here, bringing us back to that very big news that came upon us on the day, which has to do with the ISWAP, and of course the alleged death of Shekau following that particular onslaught. The thing again, also keep in mind, experts like yourself have also told the world that once it comes to the rainy season, it becomes almost impossible for anyone, to get into that part of where now we're talking about the thick of things, where the fight is happening. In this case, talking about Sambisa Forest. Some Nigerians have been asking questions. I don't know if this would also be something that you would want to react to. How come the so-called dreaded Sambisa Forest, which has become impenetrable for the Nigerian army, would see ISWAP make that incursion, which you also raised, not one, not two, not three, not 10 trucks, almost 50 of these trucks moving into that part of the forest, and ultimately taking out Shekau in that onslaught. Isn't that almost like an indictment into the activities of the Nigerian army or the Nigerian troops that have been there for almost a decade?
Exactly, Suleiman, and to sort of cap it up all, a lot of analysts are beginning to use the phrase or terminology, the political economy of the funding of terrorism, which is in a very diplomatic way of saying corruption has riddled the entire military operation. In other words, there is a political economy that has emerged, and that there are certain individuals that are benefiting from that political economy and don't want that political economy to end. Basically saying that especially the military hierarchy, who have over the last 11 to 12 years benefited from the funds that are being pushed into the fight against the insurgency. Because otherwise, how can you explain if, let's assume that in those 50 trucks, the entire size of ISWAP as a group is about 6,000. Now, the military deployment in the Northeast, the last time I checked, was around 7,300. So that means there are more military personnel in Borno State, in the Northeast, under Operation Lafayette Dwelling, than the ISWAP as an example. Now, if you add the fact that there are several other security agencies, not just the military, we could be looking at the number of between 10 to 15,000. So how come this smaller number can go into the forest? And remind you, it's not the entire 6,000 that went into Sambisa Forest. Even if we are very liberal and say it's 30% of that 6,000, which is not likely the case, they went in and they were successful. So how come we've not seen that type of incursion by the Nigerian military? So some analysts are of the opinion that there is a desire and intention for that political economy to be maintained, so that those that are benefiting will continue to benefit. And the simple reason for this, now, even if I'm not one to advocate that level of irresponsibility by the military hierarchy, I am of the opinion that the best way to eliminate these types of conspiracy theory is to enhance monitoring and evaluation within the military operations, as well as auditing functions. Now, monitoring and evaluation would ensure that key performance indicators are introduced and that those key performance indicators are measurable. And anytime we have a situation where we are not meeting our target, like in this instance, then we can take corrections. It is inconceivable that 12 years into the operation, we still have locations in Nigeria that are quote and unquote security challenged and are not under the entire control of the Nigerian government. A good example is some parts of the Sambisa forest, then locations in the local governments of Abadam and Mobar. There are several parts of Abadam and Mobar that, frankly, you and I as individuals or even the military cannot go to. These are locations that are being contested between the military and the adversary.
Well, for those listening, you can actually be a part of this program by sending us messages in WhatsApp. Let me give the WhatsApp line. It's 0909-217-2973, 0909-217-2973. And of course, you can also participate using the handle, and that's at Classic FM 973 on Twitter, Classic FM 973 on Twitter. And before we start taking messages, we'll come back looking at the army. This borders on security, Kabir. And one sore point which Nigeria is also, dealing with in the news has to do with the gruesome killing of Ahmed Gulak, who's the former aide of former President Goodluck Jonathan. And again, this happened in Nigeria's southeast. Looking at that and also tying it to the activities of security agents or agencies in trying to bring about, peace and security in Nigeria across all regions. What does this mean in the quest, to stamping out these criminals who have different names in different, regions of Nigeria?
The simple indication of this is the fact that life, unfortunately, in Nigeria has become so cheap. If someone of the standing of, as it were now, late Ahmed Gulak can be gunned down in the manner that he was gunned down, then of course it points to the simple fact that we're not safe in the country. Second point, which it's on perhaps positive, and I hope the media takes note of this, is the restraint that is coming from the north. I'm just imagining if the situation was reversed, if it was a high-ranking political official, whether he's holding an appointment or not, that was killed in the north, that's a southern, political office holder or someone who has risen high in politics, that was killed in the north under these circumstances. You can imagine what would have been in the media by now and how that would have evoked a lot of sentiment, but I'm yet to see that type of sentiment in the north. So I think that's a lesson for a lot of us to avoid, inflaming this fans of hatred and ethnicity that has already found roots in the country at the moment. When we avoid, associating developments like this with ethnic or some other considerations, it would help our unity. Now, having said that, the motive of the people who killed Ahmed Gulak is unknown at the moment. I'm not aware that they have left any message to indicate what their motive was, but we know he's a politician. We know he decamped from the PDP and he's now with the All Progressive Congress. We also know that in the state where he was killed, Imo State, there has been in the last few weeks very contentious issues regarding both the politics between the two parties. In fact, the way the governor emerged through a court ruling, and the fact that he himself believed that some of the killings that have occurred in the state and the violence, they are politically motivated, perhaps gives us an indication that this may be the motive may be political. But having said that, there are other non-state actors, such as the indigenous people of Biafra, that have issued statements around no movement, on both the 30th and the 31st, and I think even on Monday. And so that they too may have the motive for that. But then until any of these groups claim or issue the statement to indicate that, ours will just be to do the analysis, and we cannot conclude that this is the reason for the killing. Irrespective of what the reason is, I think it behoves on the public security agencies to provide protection for every citizen, every resident. And I keep on advocating for this. Security should be provided in concentric cycles. We should not provide specific or targeted security, except where the criticality of that institution demands that we provide that. A good example is Central Bank of Nigeria, because of some of its assets that are of value. Then yes, we should provide some dedicated security. But other than that, we should seek to provide concentric security. So in this instance, we were told he was gone down on his way to the airport. Now, if there is this concentric cycle of security, the protection would have been provided around the city, not to a specific individual, a specific area. We should avoid this tendency to monetize security, where if you have money, then you can be deployed with security cover or escorts that would go with you. Instead, let's look at the city as a whole and then provide concentric cycles of security.
Let me quickly bring this here, Kabir Adam. I'm sorry to cut you there. Now you're saying something about security being provided for people irrespective of their status. The Imo State Police Command, I want you to listen to this statement. It's quite short, but so that you can tell us what you think about the statement. The Imo State Police Command has just released a statement on the murder of Ahmed Gulak by armed bandits. That's how they put the headline to that statement. It's signed by SP Bala El Kana, who's the public relations officer on behalf of the Commissioner of Police, Imo State Police Command. And it reads, on 30th May at about 07:20 hours, that is about 20 minutes past 7 in the morning, armed bandits intercepted and attacked a Toyota Camry cab carrying Ahmed Gulak and two others who were on their way to San Mbakwe Airport to catch a flight. Ahmed Gulak left his room at Protea Hotel without informing the police nor sister agencies in view of the fragile security situation in the southeast and Imo in particular. He left without any security escorts, and while the cab driver took irregular route to the airport, 6 armed bandits who rode in a Toyota Sienna intercepted, identified, and shot at Ahmed Gulak at around Umuze Obiango in Ngo-Okpala local government area close to the airport. The Commissioner of Police in Imo, CP Abutu Yaro, has directed a discreet investigation into the matter, as tactical and special forces have been deployed to control the area and arrest perpetrators. So I hope you catch some keywords there from the police. I'll let you look into that, even though you don't have the text in front of you. From what I just read out, what do you make of that release from the Imo State Police Command?
So I would say it's quite unfortunate that the police is trying to absolve itself of responsibility by saying that he did not inform the police or the security agencies. However, I agree with the police that given the very precarious security situation in Imo State, someone of such standing should have accorded himself some level of security. But that for me is really not so important, and that's the point I was trying to make earlier on. If we provide security for only individuals, then we will continue to witness this type of situations. Unfortunately, we should provide concentric cycles of security. Those quote and unquote armed bandits were armed. So if there was a concentric cycle of security, while they were moving from point A to point B, they would have been detected because someone would have stopped them, searched the vehicles, and would have seen the weapons they were carrying. And by doing that, would have saved not just Ahmed Gulak, other victims that they would probably attempt to target in the past. So concentric cycle, I mean, think about it, Suleiman. Most of our cities have known access points. And I'm emphasizing this word, known access points. If you look at Lagos as an example, or Abuja, you can count the number of access points. If you are thinking of road, in Lagos, you have to include water because water transportation is an option, even though the good side is that we are not seeing a lot of criminality, at least as far as piracy is concerned, within the shores of Lagos. Yes, maybe as you go further out, we do witness that. So why don't we identify these access points, provide some level of concentric security around this access point, so that even if they beat point 1, they won't beat point 2, and neither will they beat point 3. Or if they are coming from inside, outside, the same level would be provided. And so, in my response to this statement by the police, there is no way the police can absolve itself of responsibility. It is its constitutional mandate to protect Nigerians. And even if the Nigerian does not call them, they should take certain precautions. And I've just given a very good example. Other cultures, other countries do that. I don't need to call the police if I go to New York. Even if such crimes would happen, they have a way of, through surveillance, through technology, to detect that. Now, by now, I expect that the faces and the plate number of the vehicles that carried out that should have been out there, so that a cordon and search operation would be ongoing to not only find out who they are, but to arrest them and bring them to book for this dastardly as that. If perhaps not for the restraint that the Northerners have exercising, would have thrown the country into turmoil. Because
we have to really talk about that restraint, which is commendable, which we must commend, and which every leader across sections, religious leaders, political leaders, traditional leaders, street leaders, must ensure that such continues, because I'm happy you're looking at that restraint, which is very key. We must be able, as a country, sustain that restraint so that it does not snowball into something else. Is it possible, quickly, I'll also let you comment on that issue of restraint, which is really, really commendable at the moment. But is it also possible that this is political? Because at the moment, I can see a statement coming from IPOB saying, well, denying it. Well, it's still early in the day to see if this is anything to go by. But the denier, is it possible to look at the insecurity in Nigeria, being a smokescreen or a camouflage for political killings, to the extent that when politically someone is assassinated, it can easily be hinged on unknown people, bandits, and the likes?
Exactly, Suleiman. In analyzing developments in Nigeria, it's absolutely important that the political angle is not excluded. I just mentioned earlier on in my response that the governor of Imo State himself and his aides have consistently indicated that they believe the violence in the state are politically motivated, and that's the governor himself saying that. We also have different indicators. When we look at things from a security point of view, we look at those indicators that will tell us there is a political angle. Now, how else can you explain 17 governors of the southern region meeting and not, when in their communique, they're not making any reference whatsoever to the killings and the attacks on security force formations? How else do you explain that if there is no politics involved? Now, irrespective of whether the governors kept quiet because they wanted to be politically correct or because they felt it was the lesser threat than the open grazing that they focused on, it's inconceivable that attacks against security force formation. Attacks against INEC offices would be ongoing, and then 17 governors would meet and be quiet about such attacks. So definitely there is a political angle to it. Now, whether IPOB denies that they were behind, Gulag's killing or not, the fact remains that there are very few groups that have the capability to carry out such, attacks. And it's very possible. We know that there are renegade groups even within IPOB. This year, that's one of the things that we analyzed. Renegade groups who disagree with some of the mandates or directives of the focus group itself have come out to make statements. There is also the Biafra, BLA, I've forgotten the full meaning of that acronym. So there are some smaller groups that also have that capability for the types of attacks that we're seeing. But irrespective of what it is, we must go back to the security agencies, especially the intelligence community. It is their responsibility to determine who is behind those attacks and whether there are politicians that are supporting that or facilitating it, not only to find out who they are, but to make sure they are arrested and prosecuted. It is inconceivable that at the last count, at last week Friday, my consultancy had documented 64 of such attacks targeting security force formations, security personnel on patrol or other duties, as well as INEC offices, 64 between January and May. Frankly, it's inconceivable that we would allow such things to happen to the extent that it's threatening the holding of elections in Anambra State. INEC has come out to make that cry, and governors can meet and keep quiet about it. So again, I think the responsibility lies on our politicians, especially political office holders.
No doubt. I think because some of our listeners are already, talking about the point you raised. For instance, Abu Otene is saying that I urge the North to maintain its restraint in the face of these provocative actions by a few misinformed youth from other regions. A retaliatory action will spell doom for all of us. My warning to warmongers is to be very careful, as no one tribe has monopoly of a responsibility. That's from Abu. Let me take this here. This other one is from Nelson from Songwater, and he says that the Nigerian army needs to be more honest and transparent. This same Shekau has been allegedly killed by the Nigerian army on more than 2 occasions. Thus, Shekau has more than one life. The late General Sani Apache said insurgency lasted for more than 24 hours. Sometimes there are comments I see, and I keep asking. I try doing my own research sometimes to see if I can get a footage or see if the late general actually said it. But I'm sure I see you smiling there. I'm sure you must have heard that before. Let me continue. He said the late General Apache said if insurgency lasted for more than 24 hours, the government knows about it. But the government and the army need to stop playing politics with people's lives. If there is a political will, the insurgencies can be tackled in less than 6 months. I'll take 2 more before I allow you, comment on this. And this one is from Malachi, and it says, greetings. I'd like to know what Kabir thinks about the civilian killings going on now in the East, plus the army going house to house violating people's rights. Is this what the true army does? I think before reading this, he's already addressed the killing. I'm sure you're specifically talking about the killing of Ahmed Gulag. And this is a bit long. I did go to Egypt, but I'll try as much as possible to sketch around it. Once I see messages this long, I think my site, I jump lines. So that's to keep them short and simple. He says, honestly, Sulaiman, I want to believe you and many other known journalists have been talking and doing interviews with many security experts and government officials. I think at this junction, what I expect, or what we should expect as Nigerians, is a change and a progress and assurance that all these talks and meetings have resulted in reducing the insecurity instead of things going from bad to worse. Adedeji, I think your point is clear, and that is the more reason why on the discourse here is more or less like a conversation where we bring in experts. We have a robust conversation, less interjection, getting the experts to lay it all clear so that we can get a sense of where we're headed as a nation. As you heard, Kabir Adamu, my guest today, has pointed out one key thing, and it has to do with restraint. Let's also remind our listeners and our viewers who will be watching later on this on YouTube that the man in question, Ahmed Gulak, is someone who's also suffered in the hands directly in Boko Haram, because his own father, if you recall, Kabir, was killed by Boko Haram. To have Ahmed Gulak being gunned down in a region where he's always visited, played his own, politics across Nigeria and across regions, irrespective of where you're from. It is a sad moment for us as Nigerians to be talking about this very ugly situation, Kabir.
Exactly. I mean, I interacted very closely with late Ahmed Gulak when he was, I think, the senior special advisor to former President Goodluck Jonathan on special duties, if I remember well. And he maintained an open door policy where he interacted with virtually everyone from the country. At that time, I think he had this responsibility to organize gatherings, town hall meetings that youth would participate in. And so that gave him, I think, the opportunity to learn a lot about Nigerian youth, and of course to also hear their complaints. So that's the kind of person I know, someone who had that kind of open door policy and was ready to listen to complaints from all sides of the country. And like you rightly said, that Gulak is the name of a town in Adamawa State. And that town has not once, not twice, severally been attacked by Boko Haram, including his own dad losing his life to attacks by Boko Haram. So he has been at the receiving end of, unfortunately, some of these insecurity issues, including taking his life just yesterday, unfortunately. And so it takes us back, I think, to the point. All our political office holders should know and remember that this insecurity, even if they are able to deploy security guards around themselves and security cover, has a way of affecting them either directly or indirectly. So it is absolutely necessary that as a country, that especially our political office holders, for whom we have given the authority to deal with these security challenges, to take that responsibility and deal with it. I just did a documentation of the killings that had happened across the country from January to April in my consultancy, and our numbers was 3,500 plus, about 3,500 and I think 30 or thereabout in 4 months, Suleiman. That's Nigerian lives that have been lost. So frankly, we need to look at this issue a bit more seriously than we're looking at it, and the responsibility lies squarely with our political office holders. Yes, it starts with Mr. President, but even the governors have their responsibility. Yes, it can be argued that security remains in the exclusive list, but I am of the opinion that any governor who wants to say that should stop collecting that security vote that is being given to him monthly. Likewise, governors have enormous influence on the Senate. Remember that most senators that are elected from the states, one way or the other, elected or endorsed by their governors. So imagine a situation where the governors want a bill passed in the National Assembly. All they need to do is speak to those senators, and believe me, give it months, that bill or law will be passed. So speaking about even the decentralization of the police, I am of the opinion that if the governors are serious about the decentralization of the police or security in Nigeria as a whole, all they need to do is speak to the senators that they've endorsed and who are really one way or the other serving and would listen to their request. But because perhaps they are not serious about it, we haven't seen that type of coordinated action by the governors. So it takes me back to my opening remarks that our politicians do have a responsibility, and they should stop playing politics with security. If these issues are not managed properly, they have the potential of affecting even our national unity, unfortunately.
When we come on the Discourse to do this conversation, people must also keep in mind to know how to, send messages. When you send your message, sometimes you try as much as possible to listen to really get a gist of whatever is being said. The good thing is about this is that the program is being recorded. So it doesn't look very nice when you take things out of context, because some are saying that's a bad narrative, Suleiman. I do not understand what narrative or what narrative I have been able, as the anchor here, have been painting, saying that, I'll read this from Emeka in Sola, and he says, Suleiman, I think your narrative isn't entirely right here. So I'm asking what narrative? People of the Southeast have been killed several times up north over excuses, maybe he wanted to put flimsy excuses, but something is missing there. So all this talk of restraint from the north is not fair. Remember Gideon Akaluka, who was beheaded under the supervision of I don't know if this actually happened. If you're putting someone's name, I wouldn't want to call the name. If you're very sure of who supervised the beheading of someone, then I think you should approach the police. You don't bring the immutable name and expect me to read it out on air and think that is being bold. That is one. As another has said, well, Suleiman, you're asking questions like an unintelligent and untrained journalist. Yes, I'm going to read that. You said that. And he goes on to say the questions we expect you to ask is ask the questions and stop playing to the gallery in order not to offend your guest or a particular region. My guest is an expert and it's not a politician. And you've also heard him when he put the blame on the army, especially looking at when ISWAP was able to go into Sambisa. So it tells you how people, want to listen to what they want to listen to. So he continues and he goes, if he's talking about arresting the killers of Ahmed Gulak, why can't you, Suleiman, ask him why not one Boko Haram, Fulani headsmen, and bandits? Why haven't they been arrested? He's telling me what to ask. You should ask and tell me that we're not drawing comparison to what has happened, and that is it. And you went on to say the only time you listened to me was the very first time I started here on Classic FM, and after that I started playing to the gallery, pandering to the side of the government, and it is not by force to be a journalist. I decided to read this just so you know I can choose to read and choose not to ignore, but I'm not ignoring this for today. I don't get irked by things like this by my trade, but it's not good when you try to derail people or mislead people by not listening to what is being said. I said this program will be up pretty much later on YouTube, so you can find out if Kabir Adamu has been pandering or I have been pandering to government. The good thing about communication is that if the government is on course, on the right course, be objective in sight. You don't want to bring people on radio or television because you want to play to the gallery or you're looking for the numbers. That's not journalism. Journalism is actually being objective. And in this case, we're looking at objective journalism. I think that said much. Let's quickly continue with some other messages here. Apologies, Kabir. I decided to read all of that because sometimes people send messages and they think that, because you're on air, you can't read some of these messages. But for those who are putting names of people being beheaded, I think they should approach the police. If you know anything about someone who's been killed or who has been killed, you know how to go about it. It's not in the space or place of Suleiman to now call names of those killers that have not been so established by any security agents. So let's quickly look at some of the key things you raised here, and it has to do with politicians. You said politicians must, own up and take charge of what exactly is happening across regions. And some of the key things you raised are the concerns by the governor of Imo State and some other governors across regions. But Kabir, you've also heard them say that they can only identify these problems. They don't have the powers to actually activate, a solution to solving these problems.
Remember I said that anyone who says that should reject the security vote that he's given. Secondly, I'm aware that states hold state security councils, where all the security agencies that have deployment in their state mandated to sit, and where decisions that have to do with security are taken. And the chairman of that council is the governor. Yes, it's true that when it comes to operational issues, the governor is limited as to what he can direct these heads of security agencies to do. That directive must have to be endorsed or concurred to by perhaps in the case of the police, the Inspector General of Police, or if it's the military, either Chief of Defense Staff or Chief of Army Staff. And there's a good reason for that, I guess, because of checks and balances. So again, I think it's absolutely important that for our political office holders be truthful to us. If as a country we are currently discussing the need to decentralize security, I want to restate that if the governors want that to happen in 2 months, believe me, Suleiman, it will happen. I just mentioned that most of the senators are either endorsed or have one way or the other been supported by their governors to become senators, and they are the ones who can change the law to pass the law for this decentralization. So imagine a situation where 20 out of the 26 governors in the country call the 3 senators that are representing their states and tell them that, hey, we want you to pass a bill. It will be supported by your colleagues from 19 or 20 other states. Tell me that in 2 months that will not happen. That law will be passed, believe me. And then if we're doing it through constitutional review, remember that the first stage is the National Assembly. The second stage is the state assemblies. And imagine a situation where the governors are supportive, because remember, the state assemblies are really in the hands of the governors. So again, I think we need to be truthful to ourselves. Yes, the president has some responsibility, but I personally believe the governors have more responsibility. We are putting a lot of searchlight on the presidency, but we are not doing the same to the governors. And I think we should start doing that so that this level of, I think, politicking with security is reduced, and the issues that are affecting us are brought to the fore. I mentioned earlier on that I think it's inconceivable that the 17,000 governors met and were quiet about these attacks on security force formations and INEC offices. I don't know how that is possible. I'm very concerned for them that if these non-state actors, now whether they are IPOP or like one of the guests or listeners wrote, they may be Fulani bandits, whoever they are, if they have the capacity to carry out 64 attacks within 4 months, then believe me, even government houses or cabinet offices will not be safe from their attacks. The moment they finish with this security formation, the next target will be these places. So I think we should call a spade and let our politicians understand that you can't play politics with security. Nations are built or fall because of security, and I think it's high time that our political office holders come together and address these issues. A lot of it, I know, is politics, this perception of marginalization as well as real marginalization. And the only way to solve that perception really is politics. You can't use force to address a perception of marginalization. You need to document the perception, establish whether it's real. If it's real, then how do you address it? If a good example is the Southeast have only 5 states, when the other regions have 6 or 7, as the case may be, and there is a requirement or desire for the Southeast to have 6 states, how feasible is it? Along what lines, given the landmass that is in the Southeast? The other one that I know has become very prominent is the desire to produce a president. Now, you don't gift a region a president. The region has to produce a candidate that will be acceptable to the other parts of the region and who can ride on the platforms that are currently existing. What are the 2 platforms that we know are very strong at the moment? It is the APC and the PDP. So instead of the calls, what is the Southeast doing to ensure that a candidate that will be acceptable to the other parts of the country, so that we as citizens can rally around that candidate and ensure he's elected. So those are the kind of things that I'm hoping will be done by politicians, instead of what I'm seeing at the moment, statements that unfortunately should never be publicly stated by politicians. We're hearing them at the moment.
You know, it's really sad. Sorry to butt in there because we're running off. But it's really sad to see statements coming from people, especially politicians, statements that tend to further divide us and, you know, find the evidence of really violence. That is why, let me take this, and it's from Ugo, and Ugo is saying almost same things you have highlighted. He said, Hello Sulaiman, anyone fanning and beating the drum of war should put his children and himself or herself to that battle. Any Nigerian killed should be investigated no matter where that has occurred. Just, you know, telling you that some of the key things you raised are things that he's also talking about. And this other one here, quickly here says, I pray the police track the killers, but truth be told, the Igbos have been killed at the slightest excuse up in the north with no consequences to the perpetrators. This is from Ime Opon in Ajao. You know, the thing is that no one has said there are consequences yet. Whatever Kabir is saying is to keep the peace. And when we talk about restraint, we should continue to encourage those, whoever these people are, to keep that restraint so that no one will further, you know, plunge the country into chaos. The last one I'll be taking here is from Uluyemisi Agbaje, and Agbaje says, I'm excited about what Kabir is saying with regards to the governors. The key decentralization is largely with the governors. I said this much to a friend earlier today. So let's quickly close on this, and it has to do with us, the people. You said that much about the secret agencies and politicians. If we can do this in a minute, what will be those things you expect of every Nigerian? Because as it is, it would seem as if Nigerians are divided. The slightest, in fact, looking at the sound of your name could even sway a Nigerian's opinion of you, let alone any other thing. So how can we come back together as a people of peace?
Let's remember what happened in Rwanda and what is currently happening in South Sudan. If we don't know the consequences of war, we just need to look at these two countries, and we can perhaps get a semblance of what the consequences of war. Once we do that, then we should, anyone who is trying to fund that war, we should tell that person no. And how do we tell that person no? Of course, they're arming youths, they're incentivizing the youth, they're telling them who to attack, where to attack, and this is the time, I think, to mobilize the youth and tell them no. Now, having said that, when we see something, we should say something, and I think that's the most important thing. Do not see anything going wrong in terms of mobilization, and you keep quiet. Mention it, say it out, and hopefully someone somewhere would listen and address whatever it is that is a challenge.
Well, it's a fine place to close it today. Many thanks, Kabir Adamu, for being such nice company, and to you, our listeners, and of course, our viewers on YouTube. Many thanks for being there. And keep in mind, you see anything, get a trusted, security agent or agency, and give such information to help the country. I'm Sulaiman. I'll be back again here on the Discourse next week. Bye-bye.